This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
Hello, I'm Lianne Chia, Assistant Opinion Editor at the Straits Times. You're listening to In Your Opinion, a podcast series that takes a hard look at social issues of the month. In this episode, we're talking about trading cards, something many of us may have grown up with. Pokemon cards, Bandai's One Piece card game, and Magic the Gathering. So these toys come in blind boxes or sealed packages containing items unknown to the buyer at the point of purchase. And it has raised the risk of inducing gambling, according to the Home Affairs Ministry, who have recently announced that they're planning to regulate these. It made me wonder, are these things really that bad that they need to be regulated? Aren't they just, fun? At what point does a hobby cross the line into gambling? That's what we're unpacking today. To discuss this, I'm joined by two people who can come at this from different perspectives. The first is a psychiatrist in private practice who played with trading cards growing up, and whose children collect them as well. He was also part of a government advisory work group on responsible gambling. Dr. Lim Boon Leng from Gleneagles Medical Centre, welcome to the show.
Hello, everyone.
And the second is someone who owns more than 300 trading cards and recently made headlines for rejecting a cool $1.3 million offer for one of his Pokemon cards. Chew Zhan Lun, co-founder of card marketplace CTRL Collectibles. Welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, let's jump right into it then. Okay, Zhan Lun, we start with you. So, to someone outside of this trading card world, we're looking at paying the price of a private property, literally, for a single trading card. It sounds like absolute madness. So can you explain that to me? What are the actual economics here? What gives the card this value?
Personally, right, I think it comes from a point of collectibles and what we call like nostalgia. Like I believe that most of us, we actually play all these kind of card games when we were younger. So like when we were a child, let's say for example myself, my parents didn't really want to buy for me cards unless I did well in school. You know, it's kind of like a childhood, okay, I wouldn't say trauma, but more like something that was missing in our childhood. And then once we grow older, as adults, we are spending power and we'll tend to buy back what we call these kind of like childhood memories, nostalgia, or whatever, right, that these cards actually brought us in the past. Then I think that because of this global phenomenon, it sort of like become like a alternate kind of asset class whereby people are actually trying to invest and hoping that it goes up in value. Yeah.
I see. So that actually cause the cards that you hold to kind of go up in value?
In a way. So you can say like it's like investing or like some call it speculative. So I think that at this point, we do not know how it's going to end up.
Just for the benefit of all of us, how did you manage to get that $1.3 million offer?
It was an offer on some like third-party place. So like someone was asking me whether I want to sell it. So I was like thinking, and of course it's a very huge amount of money. And I believe that when the Straits Times article was first shared, a lot of people like calling me crazy or like insane. But if we look at it, like I think just 1 month after the article came out, Logan Paul actually sold his same exact version, but his is a PSA 10, mine was a 9. And he sold for a record breaking of 16 point something US dollars. Yeah, so I think looking back, I think maybe my 1 million offer of rejection wasn't that insane. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, you mentioned PSA 9 versus PSA 10. What's the difference?
Okay, so let's say on the grading of 1 to 10, PSA is actually what we call a authenticity company. They check the condition of the cards and then they come out with the determination to say how good the card is. So 10 is being the highest and 1 is the lowest.
I see. So basically a PSA 10 would be maybe a card that's in more mint condition in a way?
Yeah, there's some things that we look at. One, for example, the centering. Like you know, you see the cards, right? There's some like yellow borders at the around the area. Yeah, so let's say when the cards company actually print out all these cards, they might not be perfectly aligned in the middle. Yeah, so like PSA or like other kind of grading companies, they actually look at all these kind of imperfections and to determine whether this card is flawless or there are some flaws to it.
I see. Okay, so you mentioned this just now, but are you not worried that the $1.3 million offer might be the best?
It might be. Yeah.
Are you keeping the card because, I don't know, is there some sort of emotional attachment to it?
I feel that, okay, at the end of the day, I think like what I was sharing for a lot of people, when we look at it from within the hobby itself, this is actually considered one of the holy grail of Pokemon cards. So I think in the whole world, there's only 110, which was the one that Logan Paul sold. So after that, the next best will be like PSA 9. So I have one of those PSA 9s around. So I think that in terms of value-wise, if the trend goes on for another 10, 20 years, it might even go up in value. So from a collector point of view, right, personally, I like the card a lot. And I feel that to own such a grail in my possession, in a way, it's a flex. Yeah. But let's say from an investment point of view, maybe I'm investing into the next 20 years. Yeah. So of course, we have to see how Pokemon as a franchise, as a model, operate down the road.
It's a risk that you're taking.
Definitely.
Oh, okay. So I just want to delve a bit more into this. Maybe you might feel sad to let it go, but at the same time, from an investment point of view, it's different.
I think that for investment, I think that coming to what we call these collectibles as a space, right? There are primarily two aspects to it. One is the emotional aspect and one is the financial aspect. So I believe that emotional aspect is actually what we just discussed, the childhood memories and everything, or more how appealing the card and the art style is to some people. Like some people, they really enjoy it, and no matter what the price is, they might want to sell. Then for the other group of people, let's say we go by the angle of financial approach, then maybe they think, wow, this card went up by 3x or 5x, maybe I should sell. So I think it's a fine line to balance between these two.
Yeah, the breaking down the difference between someone who really collects for fun versus someone who sees the cards as an investment, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a fine line. Dr. Lim, do you have anything to add to this? Well, what do you think is the difference?
I think, of course, the mindset is hugely different, right? I think on one end, you are looking at it being sentimental. So it has a certain emotional attachment or emotional meaning to it. The other one is actually a very cold, calculated situation whereby you are really asking yourself down the road, am I going to make money out of it? So I think it's two very different thought process, cognitive process. But of course, that being said, it can coexist. And I suppose these are all just, I'll put it that it risk factors for a person to not let go of the card at hand, you see. Yeah.
It sounds like this collecting of cards can become very lucrative. So when a hobby becomes this lucrative, do you think it loses its soul in a way?
I would say that I believe so. So I think there are many people whom, for example, buy cards for its initial purpose, for playing, like Magic the Gathering, they buy it to play, right? Or maybe even Pokemon cards actually is a playable card, right? But with time to come, the intention becomes twisted. At the end of the day, people are actually just buying it to collect for the sake of a potential gain. And I think unlike most investors, actually we do have a lot of lay people who, I suppose I wouldn't say they're taken in, but they have that assumption that they may be able to make some money out of it. But they're not so aware of the nuances. They are not in the industry, so to speak. So they are not so aware of the better cards, the good cards, the quality and all these sort of things. And I think they can sometimes get taken in, right? So I think there is that inherent danger in that.
Okay. What do you think, Zhan Lun?
At the rate of how the market is going, I mean, it's good for people who are already inside because we can see our cards, or rather our assets are growing. So it kind of makes us money. But then let's say for a newcomer, at this kind of price point, it's actually very scary to enter. Because what Dr. Lim said, when you enter, right, they might not know what's going on. And they think that, this is the normal price, or let's say you're paying a $5,000 for a card. But maybe just 2 years ago, it was like maybe $500. Yeah, so they might be like buying prices at all-time high without them knowing. And then as much as they like the card, right, I think that the emotional aspect comes into play when the card actually drops in value. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you still like the card. But I think that a small part of your, somewhere maybe in your mind, something you'll be thinking, why did I not wait until it go back down to 1,000 before buying it? Did I make a bad decision? So I'm not sure about you guys, but like for me, right, if I buy something too high, like I will have some kind of like a financial regret over time. And it's stuck in my mind, say, actually why at time I make this kind of decision? Yeah.
So it's kind of taking out, maybe there are some cards, correct me if I'm wrong, but it could be that there are some cards that could be valuable to those who really play the game, but at the same time, but this would be different from those who are seeing the cards as an investment, right?
Yes.
So in that sense, something could be lost, maybe?
You mean in terms of the human aspect?
Yes.
I feel that, okay, for now, right, like from what I'm seeing within the community, like I feel that people are like a bit sad because they are, in a way, they are priced out. They can't really buy the things that they want. Yeah. Or rather, it doesn't make sense for them to buy things that are so expensive right now. Yeah.
I see.
Yep, I totally agree with that. If we were to look at it from a maybe competitive perspective, right, and what's the top prize that you can win from a Pokemon competition, regardless of how good a card you have, right? And definitely is way, way below the price of a card at present. So, I mean, obviously, from a playing perspective, is really not worth it, right? Then if you look at it purely from a sense of artwork, from a sentimental perspective, even if you love the animation and all that, really, are you willing to pay millions of dollars just to own the card? So a lot of it is probably speculative investments, right? Accounting for that increase in price, and the true player, the true loyal fans, right, really get priced out of the market.
That's quite sad, right? Do you think these people at your level of this hobby, would you say they're still considered fans of the game, or are they really, do you see them more as investors managing a portfolio?
I think we are talking about maybe two slightly different aspects of this hobby. Because I believe that for the playables, we actually get those cards, what we call raws or singles. This is actually from the booster packs itself. Then for the ones that I collect, is what I call slabs. So because these are already encased in a plastic cover, so you can't really play them. So these are more like for the investing, or rather the speculative aspect. And then for the ones that you actually play with the singles, you can actually collect them, or you can play with them in real life. Yeah.
These are the ones that come in the blind packs, right?
Yeah, like the booster packs.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna move on to the idea of this whole gambling. Like, when does this really cross the line into gambling? So I guess maybe we start with you, Dr. Lim. So what do you think is happening? You know, when people buy these cards, they tear it open and it's maybe a $10 pack, right? So what exactly is happening in a person's brain when that happens?
So especially when you're opening a blind box, so to speak, and you don't know what's inside, typically this is what we call random positive reinforcement. And this is very akin to gambling, if not exactly gambling. So what happens is that typically when there is a behavior, for example, in opening the packs, the behavior itself can be positively reinforced by getting, of course, something that gives you a kick or gives you a thrill. And in this case, something that is considered a good card, right? And of course, the thrill becomes even bigger if you get like something that's worth hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. And the more there is a randomness characteristic to it, the more the brain yearns for it. So this is how nature works, right? So this is you can say that it's a hack of our brain. And therefore, when you have this positive random reinforcement, people are more likely to want to open it. And of course, then that leads to the behavior of them buying the packs.
Do you think that's maybe why it fuels this behavior? And maybe I'm trying to understand, why would adult professionals, maybe even children sometimes, they spend like thousands of dollars, right? So why would they do that just for the thrill of the reveal?
I think we cannot underestimate, right, these thrills, because it's a very simple act, but yet it gives you a lot of kick. And this kick from our reward center within our brain, meaning that when you have a thrill, right, what is really going on is that there's a surge of dopamine, pleasure neurotransmitter, to put it simply, that surges in your brain, and it gives you a very good feeling. And as human beings, we are always trying to seek such a feeling, such a positive feeling. And that drives the behavior in essence. But then as it crosses into something a little bit more pathological, there can be other cognitive errors that comes about. Because sometimes it always feels the next pack you're going to get something good, right? There's a bit of a magical thinking in gambling, in that sense. The next time I'm going to win. So you feel like if I bought a box, I've opened like 99 packs of bad cards, you're not going to bet that the next one is bad. You're going to bet that, maybe the next one is a good one. So you will go about going ahead to open it up or buy more. There is also sometimes the concept of chasing losses. So imagine, right, you have already committed or so-called invested tens of thousands of dollars, and you just feel that, I cannot just give up my investment now. I'm going to lose everything. So I'm just going to chase the loss. Maybe the next one, the next pack, just the next pack, I'm going to make it back. So I think those are characteristics of the cognitive errors in thinking.
Zhan Lun, do you see this happening in practice?
Yeah, I think as Dr. Lim was like explaining this, I get flashback. Because I think that's exactly what I was doing. Okay, because like say for example, I buy a case, so I open all these kind of what I call like booster packs, like open for fun. Then oh man, I didn't get the thing I want. So what happens? Like, the shop they have one more, so I just buy another one and try again. So when I open, I got the thing that I want. I was very happy. So I think like the dopamine kind of like surge or something you mentioned. Yeah, so I think it gives a very happy feeling. Then I think, okay, since my luck is here, why not I try one more? It's a harmless kind of like fun kind of thing. But I think that, I guess the cases differs people to people. Like maybe some have more serious addiction or whatnot. Yeah.
Let me go back to the topic of addiction, Dr. Lim. So I'm just wondering, is it possible? Is it common maybe for addicts to start off playing a game as a hobby, but they could end up as an addiction? So what usually happens in the mind if this happens?
Yep, so I think it definitely is possible. Sometimes it starts off just as a hobby, you're just enjoying the fun of it. But then, like we said, the mechanism starts to set in, you get more and more positively reinforced. Maybe you start to lose sight of other activities around you and you get more fixated. That's what we call saliency. You get fixated on just the games itself. The whole day, whether you're in school, you're at work, you're thinking about it, and you just can't wait to get the next box. Right? So the mind gets fixated. And then you start to lose more money, you want to get back your money, you start to chase your investments, you start to chase your losses, right? And again, after a while, the body and the brain does get a little bit desensitized to that thrill, and it's a bit like drinking, after a while you need to drink more, right? So you need to gamble more, you need to buy more in order to get the same amount of kick. Right, so in the end, they would then spend more money trying to do so. And so the whole cycle goes on and they reach a point where it becomes harmful use or harmful playing, if you want to put it that way, because they may be trying to get money, stealing money, begging for money in order to buy the packs. And sometimes you can even get withdrawal symptoms if you don't happen to open the packs. You just feel very uncomfortable. You get irritable with the people around you.
Oh, you've seen this happen in practice.
We do, but of course, I think we have to acknowledge that blind boxes, booster packs, because they are not so stimulating, they are really not so stimulating, it's still not as bad as actual gambling itself, your jackpots or blackjack or whatever it may be.
Yeah, to me it sounded very different because it came out as the idea as a card game for children. Yeah, so I guess on that note, I'm just wondering, is there something inherent about the way that these cards are played that might create what we call maybe a gambling mindset? Yeah.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, most of these collectibles and booster packs, right, I don't think the majority of people actually play the game. The game itself, I think there's a bit of a gambling perspective to it because you can, in actual fact, trade lose cards and win cards, right? So from that perspective, it can still be a bit like gambling. You can actually play it like a game of poker, for example. But I think the winning and losing part of it is really not that substantial. And most of the cards you lose that you're willing to put on the table is probably some, like you said, the non-slaps cards. So I don't think we often see that being too much of a problem, the playing itself. Though there have been instances, for example, I have patients who would tell me, particularly, I don't know why, but for Magic the Gathering, because I think there's a bit more of a community playing it, that they had spent a lot of money trying to get specific cards, right? Because they want to win the game. But eventually, if we were to drill down to it, right, it's more an excuse. They recognize that they are just trying, the act of opening the pack is more thrilling to them than actually playing the game or winning the game.
I think from my perspective, it's because of the current hype, the current trend. That's why people are drawn into it. So I say maybe let's say before 2024, I think the people who are actually buying all these like booster packs are the real players. Like they want maybe just to play for their decks to improve their what do you call it, strategy or something. So they actually buy these booster packs to improve their decks. So I guess it came from the playable background. But currently the way we're looking at it, people are seeing this as a way to maybe like a lottery system. They hope to get rich through a booster pack. Because if you can get the super rare card and then you send it for PSA for grading, it might be worth a few $1,000s. So let's say, for example, a booster pack, maybe now, I think maybe say $15 for the English ones. If you get the super rare card, maybe you can sell up to like for $5,000. Yeah, so it's like a very asymmetrical payoff. So maybe it's one of the reasons why it actually encourages people to chase it. Yeah.
And I think it's a bit like what you mentioned before, right? If you actually use the cards to play, the value drops?
I think it depends because, say, for super rare cards, even for the players themselves, they tend not to use it in the game. Yeah, because this is what we call like the alternate art. So like, I mean, as a very layman explanation, usually there's like let's say a version A, which is the not so rare one, and then the version B, which is the very expensive and very hard to get in the pack. So the players, most likely they'll be using version A.
I see.
Because maybe at most it costs like a few bucks. But for the version B, it may cost like $500 or and above.
So do you think, I mean, we've been hearing stories about children who have been getting involved in these cards by collecting them and just for the thrill, buying them for the thrill of getting a rare card. So, I mean, considering that these cards are for children, do you think are we exposing the younger generation to gambling?
I would think that we are, right? But I suppose this has always existed. When we were younger, there's Tigam, there are many other different types of cards available, and there were always blind packs and blind box to begin with. So it's nothing new. I would say that perhaps in those times, right, we're more restricted by our pocket money. And these days, I think there's a lot more of, I suppose, money going around, and children have more access, and therefore they are, I think, a little bit more in danger of it. The other phenomenon, of course, is I think social media. You really do see a lot of key opinion leaders, influencers on social media also be it promoting the use of such cards or the buying or opening of such packs. I do see a lot of children as well, or teens, they are often on social media and they see this and they get enticed to do so, to buy, more of these booster packs.
Wow. Anything you've seen in the industry, Zhan Lun?
I think like what Dr. Lim mentioned, I think social media, right, is a very double-edged sword because it actually influenced the current generation by a lot. Because I think maybe, say, our times, at most we only know our peers, like friends, like like real life schoolmates or something that they buy Pokemon cards. Then we want to be part of the group. That's why we buy as well. But let's say maybe if like in school, like in primary school B, it's not that popular, then the children in primary school B might not be playing Pokemon card. But now with the rise of social media like TikTok, Instagram, everything, right? It's like kids, I believe that, I don't have kids myself, but I believe that nowadays every kid has a phone. And then once they just scroll in, they'll see, booster packs opening. And it's like, I think that there's also like a survivorship bias whereby streamers, influencers, or personalities, they only post things that they win. So like, if I open the pack and I got nothing, there's no point for me to share that kind of short clip online. But if I hit a rare card, I was like, whoa, and there's like thousands of engagement, that kind. And then when kids see, they think, oh, so easy. So they want to try their hands on it. So that's how I feel.
I see. Is there anything, I mean, I'm hearing things about TikTok live streamers selling things and encouraging people to place bets on that. Are there any stories or anecdotes you've heard from the community on this?
Maybe I share a personal story. So I think that was like one time I was like playing with my friends, what we call like a pack battle. So I think that for every different kind of live stream or TikTok streamers or whoever it is, they have a different kind of house rules. And then the one that I was playing was what I call like a pack battle. So let's say how it works. Let's say, for example, there are like 6 participants. And then maybe let's say one person buys like 4 booster packs or something. So let's say maybe one booster pack costs $15. So that's $60 per person. So out of 6 people, that's like a $360 worth of cards there. So how the game works, right, is that the streamer will actually open the cards one by one according to your name and your, the order of the participants. So the 2 losers, right, let's say so they open everything and then they rank in terms of the rarity of the cards. So let's say the 2 losers will be deemed when they have their value of the open cards are less than the rest. So in this case, right, what happened was that the 2 losers will pay for everyone's card.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I mean, okay, so at the end of the day, it's like you can say it's a competitive game, but from another aspect, it might be gambling involved because at the end of the day, it's money. Yeah, so even though it's like not a huge sum of money, let's say, how much did I say that now? Like 360? So say maybe the loser pay about 180 each. Yeah.
Oh, but that still sounds quite questionable, right? Yeah, there were other questionable practices. I think there was something mentioned called Oripas, right?
Okay, so I think for Oripa, actually it originates from Japan and I think it's very popular overseas. So say for example, let's say out of 100, what they call envelopes. So some of the streamers or vendors, they'll put this kind of graded cards, like the one I mentioned just now, they put in the kind of the dark envelopes, and then they label it, let's say, for example, 1 to 100, just for example. And then maybe they'll be selling each packet at $1,000. And then you have a chance, right, to get the top hit. Maybe it's worth 20,000. And then maybe the lowest one, the lowest value you can get is maybe, let's say, $300 or $200. So actually it's a range of value, ranging from all the way 20K or maybe go as low as $200. Yeah. So that's like the basic idea of Oripal. And then you just pay, say, oh, I want number 88. So actually the streamer will open for you. Or let's say if you're in person or something, you can just open yourself. And then you see whether you get a hit inside.
Oh, that sounds kind of risky.
Yeah, so that's like the mechanics of it.
Okay. Dr. Lim, what's your take on what Zhan Lun has talked about? Do you think the practices that he mentions, do you think this crosses the line into gambling in a way?
I think as the value increase and I suppose, the more it looks like a lottery, I would say that indeed it is, it crosses into the boundary of gambling. And what is even more worrying is that most of the time, I'm sure a lot of the proper investors, they would not go into such games or buy such cards in a black paperback, or something like that. And it is usually the younger folks, right, who do so. And you can see an escalation. So initially you pay maybe $5, $8 for a pack, right? Now you are going to buy, something that's like a few $100s, right, in order to strike something that's a few $1,000s. So I think it really crosses into a sort of gambling arena, and the escalation is exactly what is very similar to gambling.
I see. So I guess in terms, the government has actually said that they are looking at regulating some of these practices, right? So the idea of regulation, to me, it sounds like it's something bad. It's for bad things. So, things like smoking, drinking, even now most recently social media. So I guess my question is, when we frame trading cards as something to regulate, do you think it comes across a bit as a vice? And isn't that kind of taking the fun out of things? What do you think?
Gambling definitely is a vice, so I have no problems with it being seen as a vice, and I think indeed it is that way. And sometimes I'm sure there are people who would buy cards and play with it and do the right ethical thing. But in essence, right, to begin with, be it blind boxes or booster packs or blind packs, they are exploiting the human psyche, right, in an unethical way to begin with, right? This random positive reinforcements that causes people to want to continue behaving this way, to buy the packs, to open the packs. And therefore, I think to begin with, it's a vice. Whether it is mild vice, is not such a terrible vice, or whether it is a very bad vice, that's besides the point, right? Incidentally, these cards are nowadays valued very highly. I think that's an incidental thing. But again, such mechanics are not just unique to Pokemon. It is pervasive across all sorts of card games, blind boxes. And I think the fact that it is regulated shows the moral of our society, right? What moral standards should we have? And I think regulations itself is a representation of that.
Zhan Lun, what do you think?
For me, I believe that regulation is what I call a necessary evil. Yeah, it's not because it's bad per se, but more I feel that like people are saying, oh, regulation is going to take a fun out of it. But personally, I believe that no, it doesn't really take a fun out of it, but in fact, it protects the vulnerable group who might not know what they are doing because of the lack of maturity. Let's say, for example, as we discussed earlier on, like small children. First of all, I'll say, for myself, let's say as a 10-year-old or even let's say 14 or 15, right? I didn't have the concept of money. And I believe that, like what Dr. Lim said, now children are so exposed with, I think, like generally speaking, by getting wealthier. And then it's like, for children, right, they have no idea how hard it is to actually earn money. Or like, what is the real concept of money? So like for them to actually spend their parents' money to gamble, to try their luck, at certain odds of things happening, right? I think that is sort of conditioned them from the start of a very young age that it reinforces this potential behavior as they grow up. The thinking that everything has a chance and if I try long enough, I might hit it. Which, it is true, but now we're talking about this thing called leading a very fine line into gambling aspect of it.
Yeah, and just to add to Chandu's point, really as a parent, I feel it's very unfair for a parent, right, to have to pay for the packs. But I think that's besides the point. I think the interesting thing is, like he said, use just to go to the biology of it, use young children, their frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex is really not that developed, and that accounts for their impulsivity. And being impulsive, they're more likely to engage in gambling and in such activities. I think though we don't have actual data to support this, but then I think could such behaviors, buying blind packs, be a gateway to more severe gambling behavior in adulthood?
So it could, right?
I think it can.
So I guess we are in favor of regulations.
For me, I would say it depends. It really depends on what kind of regulation are we looking at. If let's say it's like a blanket ban kind of thing, right, then I'll be the first to say, I strongly disagree. Because I feel that it's actually very unfair to have a blanket ban over a hobby or let's say this trading card game. Because by the same token, for lack of better comparison, in fact you can see everywhere in Singapore, right, it's actually what I call like a lottery base. Let's say for example, school admissions. It's at a certain point, it's going to be like a lottery, like, you didn't get to draw the lot for your child to get into school. Should we ban that as well? No, you can't. It doesn't make sense. Or let's say if I dare, one step ahead is balloting for BTOs. Is that also lottery system? Technically it is. So by the same token, you can't really do a blanket ban over these kind of things. Because at the end of the day, I believe that how reality is, right, is like it's still a matter of chances. And you can't really ban something that is like random because it's against nature, I would believe. So in fact, if let's say we have a sensible kind of regulation, perhaps let's say have an age limit for like certain kind of products or something, then I think that it makes sense because like what we discussed, children, they might not have be the sensible knowledge. So maybe like, when you're with the parents can help them to like tell them, you can buy this, but maybe at a certain kind of, I don't know, like a limit to it. Yeah, so that's up to the parents to actually decide what's best for their children. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I think we are not here to encourage banning all vices. I think there are vices in life. Hedonism has its place in society. But I think parental guidance, right? I mean, even cinemas, movies, you do need parental guidance. I think that's where I would say that we want to allow parents to be more literate about such issues and sending a signal, be it through, I think the best way is still through regulations, because just educating, be it on social media or any other platforms, don't always seem to work. So I think if there's regulations, it brings a signal to the parents, and I suppose then the vulnerable group can be protected.
Okay, so just onto the nature of the regulations. One of the core debates, we see this in overseas markets, is forcing companies to explicitly print the odds of winning a rare item. So if we do this, right, do you think the mystery is removed and like people would see how terrible their chances are? Do you think the magic of the hobby would die in that sense?
Personally, I think that people who actually open account with like packs, we kind of know what it is already. So like it's still there's a 1% chance, that I might get this card in this whole set. So it doesn't really deter people who's already inside, but then it might actually make people to think twice. Let's say as a parent, should I let my child to take on the risk of spending money just for that 1% probability? Yeah. So I think that for parents, they might not know because they are not in the hobby itself. So actually the parents might have no knowledge of what's going on. So until they see, actually it's so hard to get it. And maybe they'll think twice and then they explain to their children like the pros and cons, and then they take it from there.
I see. Yeah.
I don't think it will make a difference. In fact, most of the time, I do see these days, the odds are like to say it's known and even printed already. But I think humans are not intuitively good at critical thinking and intuitively good at defining or understanding these numbers. So someone who's susceptible to addiction and gambling, right, the numbers does not make any difference to them. They will still feel that, it could be 1 in 100, but I can still get it. The printing of the numbers, I think, is more useful in making the company obliged not to cheat and to really provide that probability. I think that there can be some use in that.
Okay, so it seems like in terms of regulations, maybe age-based in a way would help?
Oh, definitely. I think it should be really based on age. I think some adults beyond 21, if you're allowed to gamble, to go to casinos and to be playing jackpot, then really there shouldn't be any issues with regards to blind boxes. But really, I think, or loot box or packs for that matter, I think it really pertains to children, youths. Yeah.
It's like what you said, right, Zhan Lun?
Yeah. I think that we actually need to go back slightly on the point of, say, forcing companies to oblige to the probability. Maybe there's one interesting that I can share, like based on what I saw personally. It's like, for Oripa, like I mentioned earlier on, let's say you can force the company, right, or like the vendors or the shop or whatever it is, to actually be honest about it. Because at the end of the day, like out of 100 envelopes, we actually do not know what's inside. And then for all, let's say maybe you go in the shop, there's only 95 packets left. And then you buy all 95, you realize, the 20K card is not inside. So maybe the shop will say, oh, sorry, someone just bought it. Because I do not know, because he brought it back home to open. So now it's like a borderline between a gamble and or fraud. Because you have no idea whether the shopkeeper is lying or not. For all you know, right, the 20,000 card was never there to begin with. And then nobody actually bought that 5 envelopes from him. Yeah. So I think that for regulation-wise, it's actually to weed out bad actors. Yeah. I'm just saying that the unethical things that some of these Oripa sellers are doing is by rigging the odds so badly that it's in their favor all the time. Yeah.
I see. Okay, so just maybe one final question for the both of you. So let's imagine 5 or 10 years, we've normalized the regulations globally. So, and I mean, let's just say all these questionable practices, maybe it's over. So what do you think this hobby will look like? Do you think it will survive?
Personally, I think that as a collectibles, as a whole itself, right, I think it'll still be strong. Because like, if you look at those kind of like ancient baseball cards, maybe not so much in Singapore, but in America, maybe Japan, they have a very strong collectible culture. Let's say maybe a very vintage baseball card itself can be worth like $5 million, even though it's like a PSA 1. So it's actually made the headlines like a few months back. Yeah. So can Pokemon actually reach that kind of level? It's a big question mark. Which of course, I personally hope that it does.
Dr. Lim, as a parent, what do you think?
I suppose, at the end of the day, I think be it cards, games, right, even through investment shares and stocks and all that, right, there are always wax and wane. If I were to use gambling as an example, people will always gamble. What is the popular game at that moment? I can't predict, right? So I think if I can predict, then I'll be buying cards right away. I mean, I agree, Zhan Lun. I mean, over the years, there are certain types of cards that seem to hold its place in society, and perhaps some would be entrenched in a cultural sense. So those would be more likely to survive. But exactly what those are, I think I wouldn't be able to predict.
Yeah, it would be great if we could, right? Well, with that's a wrap for In Your Opinion. I'm Lianne Chia. Thank you, Zhan Lun and Dr. Lim, for your insights.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You can email us your thoughts on this issue. Also, if you would like to read ST articles or opinion columns, these links can be found in our podcast show notes. This episode is edited by Haji Rahim. Thanks for listening.
Send your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or within our Straits Times app. Thanks for listening.